The first time Alexander Blackwood heard the name Emily Carter, he laughed. Not because the name was funny, not because he knew anything about her. In fact, that was the problem. He knew almost nothing about the woman his parents wanted him to marry. He laughed because the entire situation sounded impossible. A man like him did not get arranged into marriage. Alexander Blackwood was 35 years old, the founder of one of the fastest growing investment firms in the country, a man whose signature could move millions of dollars with a single decision. Newspapers called him a genius. Business magazines called him ruthless. Competitors called him dangerous. But his mother called him stubborn, and on that cold Friday evening, sitting inside the grand library of the Blackwood estate, Alexander realized that his wealth, influence, and success meant nothing against the one person who had always been able to challenge him. His mother. "You cannot be serious," Alexander said, placing his glass of whiskey on the table. Across from him, Eleanor Blackwood sat perfectly straight in her antique chair. She had the calm expression of someone who had already won an argument before it even started. "I am completely serious," she replied. Alexander looked toward his father, hoping for support. None came. Richard Blackwood simply adjusted his glasses and looked away. That was when Alexander knew this was not a conversation. It was a decision that had already been made. "You called me here after a 6-hour business meeting to tell me I need to get married." Alexander asked. "To tell you that you need to stop running from your personal life," his mother corrected. Alexander gave a humorless smile. "Running? Mother, I built a company from nothing. I work 18 hours a day. I have created jobs for thousands of people. I am doing just fine." "You built an empire," Eleanor said calmly. "But you built walls around yourself while doing it." The words irritated him because they were too close to the truth. Alexander hated emotional conversations. Numbers made sense. Tracks made sense. People did not. People changed their minds. People betrayed. People disappointed. Business was easier. In business, if someone wanted something, they simply admitted it. In relationships, people hid behind feelings and expectations. "I don't need someone distracting me," Alexander said. His mother sighed. "That is exactly why you need someone." Alexander stood and walked toward the enormous window overlooking the estate gardens. Outside, everything was perfectly arranged. The flowers were trimmed. The pathways were clean. Every tree stood exactly where it was supposed to stand. He liked things that way. Control. Predictability. Marriage was the opposite. "So who is she?" he finally asked. Eleanor exchanged a glance with her husband. That small movement immediately caught Alexander's attention. "What?" "She is someone you have known about since childhood," his father said. Alexander turned around. "I have no idea what you are talking about." "Emily Carter," Eleanor said. The name meant nothing. Alexander waited. Nothing came. "Who?" His mother looked disappointed. "The Carter family. Your father worked with her grandfather years ago." Alexander frowned. "And now I am supposed to marry someone because our families knew each other." "It is more complicated than that." "No," Alexander replied. "It sounds exactly that simple." His father leaned forward. "Emily is a good woman." Alexander almost smiled. That sentence alone made him suspicious. Whenever older people described someone as good, it usually meant there was something they were trying not to mention. "Good how?" Alexander asked. His mother hesitated. "She is kind, intelligent, family-oriented." Alexander crossed his arms. And what?" "There is always an and." Silence filled the room. Alexander noticed it. The hesitation, careful expressions. The way his parents avoided looking directly at him. Finally, his mother spoke. "She is not like the women you usually spend time with." Alexander raised an eyebrow. There it was. The hidden message. What does that mean? It means she is different. Different how? His mother looked uncomfortable. She is quiet. She doesn't care about attention. She has never been interested in wealth or status. Alexander stared at them. And you think that is supposed to convince me? No, Eleanor replied. We think it should make you think. Alexander walked back toward the table. Let me understand this. You want me to marry a woman I have never met because she is quiet, because she is genuine, or because nobody else wants her. The moment the words left his mouth, his father's expression changed, not anger, disappointment. Alexander noticed, and somehow that bothered him more. That is unfair, Richard said. Alexander looked away. He knew it was harsh, but he also knew the world they lived in. People did not hide imperfections. They marketed themselves. They posted their best moments, created versions of themselves they wanted others to believe. So when someone had no social presence, no public image, no interest in being seen, Alexander assumed there was a reason. What does she look like? He asked. His mother frowned. Why does that matter? Because apparently I am being asked to marry her. She is beautiful in her own way. Alexander almost laughed. That phrase was dangerous. Beautiful in her own way usually meant someone was not traditionally attractive. He imagined someone awkward. Someone who had spent her entire life hiding. Someone who would cling to him because of his money and family name. And immediately, he hated the idea. I cannot believe you arranged a marriage with a woman you are describing like a charity project. His mother's eyes narrowed. That is enough. But Alexander continued. You know what this sounds like. You found someone who would accept me because she would be grateful. Emily Carter is not desperate. His mother said firmly. Then why agree to this? Another silence. Alexander noticed again. What? His father sighed. She agreed because her family also wanted the arrangement. Alexander shook his head. This is unbelievable. He walked toward the door. We are done here. Alexander. He stopped. His mother's voice softened. You have spent your whole life proving you do not need anyone. He did not turn around. Maybe I don't. That is what worries me. For a moment, the room became quiet. Then Eleanor said something that stayed with him. You have everything except the one thing money cannot buy. Alexander slowly looked back. What? A person who knows you without being impressed by your name. He wanted to argue. He wanted to tell her she was wrong. He could not. Because somewhere deep inside, he knew his mother had identified the one thing he could not purchase, genuine connection. Still, that did not mean he was willing to marry a stranger. Especially one he already believed he would never want. I will meet her, Alexander said. His parents looked surprised. But that does not mean I will marry her. His mother smiled slightly. We will see. Alexander hated that smile, because it told him she already knew something he didn't. 3 weeks later, Alexander found himself standing in front of a mirror while a tailor adjusted his wedding suit, a wedding suit he never thought he would wear. Everything about the situation annoyed him. The flowers, the guests, the photographers, the endless conversations about arrangements and traditions. To him, marriage was supposed to be a personal decision between two people, not a business agreement between families. Yet here he was, preparing to marry Emily Carter, a woman he had met only twice. The first meeting had confirmed everything he expected. She was polite. Too polite, quiet, almost painfully reserved. She had answered his questions carefully, never interrupting, never challenging him. He remembered leaving that meeting thinking one thing. She was exactly what he feared. Someone who would simply agree with everything. Someone who had no fire, no personality, no edge. And somehow that bothered him more than anything else. Because Alexander did not want someone who followed him. He wanted someone who could stand beside him. But he had convinced himself Emily was not that person. The rumors around her did not help. Business friends had heard about the arrangement. Some laughed, some whispered. One person even told him, "She will never embarrass you." Alexander hated that sentence. Not because it insulted Emily, because it revealed what everyone assumed. That he was settling. That this marriage was a sacrifice. The morning of the wedding arrived with clear skies and a strange sense of unreality. The ceremony was held at the Blackwood family estate. Hundreds of guests filled the gardens. Powerful executives, old family friends. People who had known Alexander since he was a child. Everyone wanted to see the woman who had managed to accomplish what nobody else had. Getting Alexander Blackwood to commit. He stood at the altar wearing a black tuxedo, expression controlled, emotions hidden. That was his specialty. Control. Never let anyone see uncertainty. Never let anyone know what you feel. Then the music changed. The conversation stopped, and everyone turned toward the entrance. Alexander looked up. And for the first time in years, he forgot how to breathe, because the woman walking toward him was not the woman he had imagined. Not even close. She did not walk like someone nervous. She did not look like someone grateful. She did not appear like someone lucky to be chosen. She walked like someone who knew exactly who she was. Her dress was elegant, not excessive. Her confidence was effortless. Her eyes were calm. And when she looked directly at Alexander Blackwood, there was something in her expression that confused him. She was not trying to impress him. She was studying him. Almost like she was the one deciding whether he was worth her time. For the first time in his life, Alexander felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. The woman everyone had described as ordinary was standing in front of him looking anything but ordinary. And the worst part, she seemed completely aware of the effect she was having. When Emily finally reached the altar, she smiled slightly. Not shy, not nervous, knowing smile, a smile that said she had just watched his entire world shift. Alexander leaned slightly closer. "You are not what I expected." Emily looked at him calmly. "Neither are you." The answer caught him off guard. Most people tried to impress him. She challenged him, and before Alexander could respond, the ceremony began. For the first time that day, he was not thinking about the marriage. He was thinking about the woman standing beside him. Who was Emily Carter really? And why did he suddenly feel like he was the one being judged? The ceremony ended. Alexander Blackwood barely remembered any of it. He remembered the sound of the guests applauding. He remembered the photographer asking them to smile. He remembered shaking hands with people whose names he had forgotten 5 seconds after hearing them. But most of all, he remembered Emily, the woman standing beside him. The woman who had completely destroyed every assumption he had made about her. Throughout the reception, Alexander watched her from a distance. That was something he had never done before. He was usually the person everyone watched, the person people approached, the person whose opinion mattered. But tonight, his attention kept drifting toward his wife. Because Emily Carter was confusing. She was not trying to win anyone over. She did not chase conversations with wealthy guests. She did not laugh louder than necessary. She did not act impressed by the expensive decorations, the famous names, or the powerful people surrounding her. Instead, she moved through the room like someone who belonged anywhere she stood, and that bothered Alexander, because he had spent years believing people were divided into 2 categories, those who wanted something from him, and those who were afraid of him. Emily seemed to fit into neither. She simply existed, and somehow that made her impossible to ignore. "Your wife is interesting." Alexander turned toward his best friend, Daniel Reed, who was holding a glass of champagne and watching Emily speak with a group of older women near the garden. "Interesting," Alexander repeated. Daniel smiled. You know what I mean? No, actually, I don't. Daniel laughed. You spent the entire wedding looking like a man attending his own trial, and now you cannot stop watching her. Alexander looked away immediately. I am observing. Observing. Yes. Daniel shook his head. You are the worst liar I know. Alexander ignored him, but the truth was uncomfortable. He was curious. That was all. At least, that was what he told himself. Curiosity was harmless. Attraction was complicated. Feelings were dangerous, and Alexander Blackwood avoided dangerous things. Later that evening, after the final guests had left, Alexander and Emily finally arrived at the penthouse that would now be their home. The apartment sat high above the city, surrounded by glass walls and breathtaking views. Normally, Alexander loved it. It represented everything he had built. Success. Achievement. But tonight, standing there with Emily beside him, the place felt different. Less like a home, more like a showroom. Emily slowly walked through the living room, looking around. It is beautiful. Alexander expected excitement. Instead, her tone was thoughtful. You don't like it? She turned. I didn't say that, but you sounded like you were disappointed. Emily smiled slightly. You are very good at reading business reports. What does that mean? It means you are used to analyzing everything. Alexander frowned. And sometimes people are not problems to solve. The comment caught him off guard. Most people carefully chose their words around him. Emily did not. You always talk like that? He asked. Like what? Like you are secretly trying to insult me. She laughed softly. No. Sometimes I openly insult you. For a moment, Alexander stared. Then something unexpected happened. He smiled. A real smile, small, almost invisible. But Emily noticed. There it is. What? What? You actually know how to smile. Alexander immediately returned to his serious expression. I smile. Your employees probably disagree. My employees respect me. They fear you. There is a difference. Exactly. The conversation should have annoyed him. Instead, it felt strangely refreshing. Everyone around Alexander carefully avoided challenging him. Emily seemed to enjoy doing exactly that. She walked toward the hallway. I assume there is a guest room. There is. Good. He looked at her. You are taking the guest room. She stopped. Were you expecting something else? No, but his answer came too quickly. Emily noticed. Relax, Alexander. I am not planning to force a romantic marriage just because we signed papers. I never thought that. Your face says otherwise. My face says nothing. Your face says everything. He almost argued, then stopped, because somehow she was right. That irritated him. The next morning, Alexander woke up at 6. He always woke up at 6. His schedule depended on discipline. He exercised. He checked reports. He reviewed his meetings. Every minute had a purpose. But when he entered the kitchen, he stopped. 'Cause Emily was already there. And she looked completely different from the elegant woman he had seen at the wedding. She was wearing oversized sweatpants, a loose shirt, and her hair was tied messily. She was standing barefoot in his expensive kitchen making coffee. Alexander stared. You know there are people who work here. Emily looked over her shoulder. Good morning to you too. I mean the staff. Yes. They prepare breakfast. She looked back at the coffee machine. I know. Then why are you making coffee? Because I wanted coffee. Alexander had no response. That answer was too simple. You are married to a millionaire? He said. Yes. You live in a luxury penthouse? Yes. You have access to anything you want? Yes. And you are making your own coffee? Emily turned around. Alexander, it is coffee, not a royal ceremony. He looked at the cup in her hand. You are unusual. I will take that as a compliment. It wasn't, still taking it. Again, he almost smiled. Almost. She handed him a cup. He looked surprised. For you. I drink espresso. I know. How? Your assistant told me. Alexander looked suspicious. You talked to my assistant? Yesterday. Why? Because I wanted to know where the coffee beans were. He stared. You interviewed my assistant about coffee? Yes. That is insane. Maybe. She took a sip. But now I know your coffee preference, your schedule, and that you have a habit of forgetting lunch when you are stressed. Alexander froze. How do you know that? Emily shrugged. You are not as mysterious as you think. That sentence stayed with him. Because Alexander had spent his entire life building a reputation of being untouchable. Yet this woman had been in his home for less than 24 hours and already noticed things nobody else did. Over the next few weeks, Alexander discovered that living with Emily Carter was impossible. Not because she was difficult, because she changed everything. His apartment was no longer silent. There were books on the coffee table, plants near the windows, music playing in the mornings, small reminders that another person existed there. At first, he hated it. The first time he saw a blanket left on the sofa, he folded it and placed it away. The next morning, the blanket was back. The second time, he ignored it. The third time, he found himself sitting under it while answering emails. That realization bothered him. Emily had somehow invaded his carefully controlled life without forcing her way in. She simply became part of it. One evening, Alexander came home earlier than usual. He expected silence. Instead, he heard laughter. Not television laughter, real laughter. He followed the sound and found Emily sitting on the floor surrounded by papers. She looked up. You are home early. What are you doing? Working. He looked at the papers. You call that working? Yes. It looks like a disaster. It is called creativity. Alexander picked up one page. It was a travel article. He started reading. After a few seconds, his expression changed. You wrote this. Emily watched him carefully. Yes, it is good. She looked surprised. That almost sounded like a compliment. It was. Should I record this moment? He ignored the joke. Why haven't you published it? Her expression changed slightly. The humor disappeared. I have tried, and editors rejected me. Why? She shrugged. Maybe they didn't like it. Alexander looked back at the article. He had read thousands of business documents, contracts, reports, market analysis. This was different. This had something. Emotion. Life. You are talented. Emily looked away. People always say that when they are trying to be nice. I am not trying to be nice. Then why say it? Because it is true. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and Alexander realized something. Emily was not looking for approval. She was not trying to impress him. She actually believed she was not enough. That surprised him more than anything, because from the outside, she seemed confident. Underneath that confidence was someone who had spent years being told she was too different. Too much. Not enough. And suddenly, Alexander understood something. Maybe they had more in common than he thought, 'cause he also knew what it felt like to constantly prove yourself. The difference was that Alexander built walls around his insecurity. Emily built humor. That night, for the first time since the wedding, they sat together without arguing. They talked. Not about marriage, not about their families, not about expectations, just about life. She told him about wanting to travel the world. He told her about starting his first company in a tiny rented office. She laughed when he admitted he once slept at his desk for 3 days during a major deal. You are insane. I was focused. You were one bad coffee away from becoming a robot. Maybe I still am. Emily looked at him. No, the answer was immediate. Alexander raised an eyebrow. No. No. Why? Because robots don't laugh when someone insults their coffee. He looked away. But this time, he could not hide the smile, and Emily saw it. She always saw everything. The weeks that followed changed something neither Alexander nor Emily wanted to admit. At first, they had both treated the marriage like an agreement, a responsibility, something they had accepted because their families wanted it. Alexander believed he could handle it the same way he handled everything else in life, with logic, with distance, with control. But Emily was not a business deal. She was not a contract he could review and negotiate. She was a person, and the more time he spent with her, the harder it became to keep pretending she was simply a stranger sharing his home. She had a way of appearing in the smallest moments. A handwritten note beside his laptop reminding him to eat lunch, a new book placed on his desk because she thought he would enjoy it. A cup of tea waiting for him after a difficult meeting, things that seemed insignificant. But Alexander noticed all of them, and that was the problem. He noticed. For most of his life, Alexander had trained himself not to need anyone. His father had taught him that emotions could become weaknesses. His business experience had taught him that trust had limits, and his past relationships had taught him that many people loved the idea of Alexander Blackwood. More than the person himself, women were attracted to his wealth. Friends respected his influence. Business partners valued his success. But Emily was different. She had met him at his worst. A cold, arrogant man who assumed he already knew everything about her. And somehow, instead of walking away, she challenged him. She made fun of him. She questioned him. She saw through him, and Alexander hated how much he liked it. One Saturday morning, he entered the living room and immediately noticed something was wrong. His bookshelf. He stopped. The entire thing had changed. His carefully organized collection of business books had been rearranged. Alexander stared at it, slowly turned toward the kitchen. Emily. A voice answered. Yes. What happened to my bookshelf? She appeared holding a bowl of fruit. What do you mean? My books. Yes. Where are they? On the shelf. No, they are not. She walked over and looked, then smiled. Oh. That single word made him nervous. What does "all" mean? It means you noticed. Of course I noticed. I wondered how long it would take. Alexander stared. You did this intentionally? Maybe. Why? Because your bookshelf looked like a corporate office. It is a bookshelf. It was emotionally empty. He looked confused. Books do not need emotions. Emily looked at him seriously. That sentence explains a lot about you, he sighed. What did you do? I organized them by feeling. Alexander blinked. By what? Feeling. That is not a category. It is now. He walked closer. My finance books are next to novels. Yes. My biographies are mixed with poetry. Yes. Why? Because sometimes people who understand numbers need to remember emotions. Alexander looked at her. You rearranged my books to teach me a lesson. No. Then why? She smiled. Because I thought it looked better. He wanted to argue. He really did. But then he noticed something. The bookshelf actually looked better. The colors matched. The room felt warmer. He hated admitting it. But Emily had improved it. You are not going to say anything, are you? She asked. Because I am right. No. Because you know I am right? Alexander looked away. That is not the same thing. Emily laughed. And that laugh bothered him. Because he realized he had started waiting for it. The biggest change came when Alexander invited Emily to a business gala. Normally, he attended these events alone. They were predictable, complimented him. People asked about investments. People tried to build connections. But this time, he had a wife, and everyone wanted to meet her. When they arrived, the room changed. Whispers started immediately. "That is his wife. She is different. I expected someone else." Alexander heard every word. Normally, he ignored gossip. But this time, he looked at Emily. He wondered if she heard it too. She had. But she did not react. That impressed him. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She looked at him.
Why wouldn't I be?
"People are talking. They always do. You are not bothered." Emily smiled. "Alexander, people talked about me before they knew me. Why should I suddenly care now?" That answer stayed with him because he realized she had spent years being judged, and yet she refused to become bitter. A woman approached them. "Alexander," he turned, "Victoria Hale." A woman from his business circle, beautiful, elegant, confident, and someone who had clearly expected to be standing beside him tonight. "Victoria," Alexander greeted. Her eyes moved toward Emily. "So this is the mystery wife." Emily smiled politely. "Yes, I am the mystery," Victoria laughed. "I suppose everyone is curious. Alexander has always been very private." Emily nodded. "I noticed. There was something in Victoria's tone. Something subtle. A hidden insult." Alexander noticed it immediately. "Emily is not a mystery," he said. Victoria looked surprised. "No, no." He placed a hand gently on Emily's back. "She is my wife." The words were simple, but something about the way he said them changed the atmosphere. Emily looked at him, because for the first time, Alexander had not sounded like a man fulfilling an obligation. He sounded proud. Later that evening, while they were leaving, Emily looked at him. "You didn't have to do that."
Do what?
"Defend me." "I wasn't defending you." "No. No." He opened the car door. "I was correcting someone who was wrong." She smiled. "You are terrible at admitting you care." "I do not care." "Of course." "I don't." "Alexander." "What?" "You are holding the door open for me." He looked down. He was. He immediately stepped back. "I was being polite." Emily laughed. "You are impossible." But she was smiling, and Alexander realized something dangerous. He wanted to keep making her smile. The realization followed him home. That night, he sat in his office long after midnight. Usually, late nights were easy. Work kept his mind busy. But tonight, he wasn't thinking about business. He was thinking about Emily. The way she challenged him. The way she looked at the world. The way she never seemed impressed by the things that impressed everyone else. His phone. There were dozens of messages waiting. Employees, clients, partners, important people. His eyes stopped on one message. From Emily. A picture. He opened it. It was his own bookshelf. The one she had rearranged. Picture she had written. Still ugly. But improving. Alexander stared. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. Alone in his office. A sound his employees rarely heard. And that scared him. Because Alexander Blackwood was changing. Not because someone forced him. Not because he needed to. But because someone had entered his life and made him want to become different. The next morning, everything changed. Not because of something between Alexander and Emily, but because of someone from the past. Someone who had no idea that the marriage she had ignored was becoming something real. Her name was Charlotte Whitmore, and she was about to return. Charlotte had been Alexander's girlfriend for 3 years, the woman everyone assumed he would eventually marry. She came from wealth. She understood his world. She knew the rules. And unlike Emily, Charlotte never challenged him. She admired him. At least, that was what Alexander used to think he wanted. When his assistant informed him that Charlotte had returned to the city, he felt nothing. At least, that was what he told himself. "Do you want me to cancel the meeting?" His assistant asked. Alexander frowned. "Why?" "She requested to see you." "Then tell her I am busy." The assistant hesitated. "Are you sure?"
Yes.
But after the call ended, Alexander sat quietly. Because he remembered the old Alexander, the man who would have immediately agreed. The man who would have cared about keeping things comfortable. But he was not that man anymore. And the reason was sitting upstairs in his apartment, probably drinking tea and reading a book with some ridiculous comment written in the margins. Emily. The thought surprised him, because a few months ago, another woman's return would have affected him. Now, all he could think about was how Emily would react, and that realization was impossible to ignore. He was not protecting a marriage arrangement anymore. He was protecting something he had started to value. Something fragile, something real. But Alexander had not yet learned the hardest lesson. Sometimes the thing you finally find is the thing someone else is determined to take away. Charlotte Whitmore had always been confident. The kind of confidence that came from knowing her worth. The kind that came from never having to question whether the world would make space for her. She had grown up surrounded by privilege, influence, and people who told her she was exceptional. And for a long time, Alexander Blackwood had been part of that perfect picture, had met at a charity event years earlier. At the time, Alexander was already successful, but he was not yet the man the world knew. He was still building, still proving himself. Charlotte had admired his ambition. She admired his intelligence. She admired the fact that he was different from the wealthy men she had grown up around. He was not lazy. He was not careless. He was hungry. And Alexander had admired something about Charlotte too. She understood his world. She knew how to behave at formal dinners. She knew how to speak with investors. She knew how to stand beside him without questioning him. Back then, that had felt like compatibility. Now, looking back, Alexander wondered if it had simply been convenience, because Charlotte never challenged him. She never asked why he worked until midnight. She never told him he was becoming cold. She never looked at him and said, "You are successful, but you are not happy." Emily did. Almost every day. And somehow, those annoying little observations had become the things he valued most. When Alexander arrived home that evening, he expected Emily to be working in the living room. Instead, he found her sitting near the window, staring at the city. There was something peaceful about the way she sat there. Like she belonged in that space, like the apartment had always been waiting for her. "You are quiet," Alexander said. Emily looked over. "That is a dangerous observation coming from you." "Why?" "Because usually you complain that I am too loud." He smiled slightly. "I never said I disliked it." Her eyebrows lifted. "No. No. That is almost a compliment." "It is a compliment." She studied him. "Are you feeling okay?" Alexander laughed softly. "There it is." "What?" "The fact that you think something is wrong because I said something nice. That is because you treat compliments like rare, expensive items. I do not. You do." He walked toward the kitchen. "Charlotte is back." The smile disappeared from Emily's face. Only for a second, but Alexander noticed. "She contacted me today." Emily looked down. "Are you going to see her?" I said no. Her eyes lifted. "You said no." "Yes." "Why?" Alexander paused. Because the real answer was complicated. Because the old him would have said yes. Because the old him would have cared about avoiding awkward situations. Because the old him would have worried about what people thought. Instead, he simply said, "Because there is nothing to discuss." Emily nodded slowly. That sounds reasonable, but something in her voice changed. Alexander noticed immediately. "You do not believe me. I believe you." "You are lying." She looked away. "I am not." "Emily," she sighed. "Just think people do not disappear from your life that easily." Alexander leaned against the counter. "Are you worried about her?" "No." "You are." She smiled faintly. You are getting better at reading people. Maybe I learned from someone. That answer surprised her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Emily said quietly, "She was probably more suitable for you." Alexander frowned. "What does that mean?" "She fits your world." "You think you do not?" Emily looked around the apartment. At first, no. That honesty caught him. She continued, "I walked into this place and everything looked perfect. The furniture, the view, the lifestyle, everything was exactly where it belonged. And I felt like the one thing that did not belong." Alexander stared at her, because that was the first time Emily had admitted feeling insecure. The woman who joked about everything, the woman who challenged everyone, the woman who seemed impossible to hurt, was admitting she had felt out of place. "Emily," she shook her head, "it is fine." "No." She looked at him. "It is not fine." The seriousness in his voice surprised both of them. "You are not some person who accidentally entered my life." She stayed silent. "You are my wife." The words hung between them. Not because they were legally true, because they were emotionally true, and Alexander realized he meant them. A few days later, Charlotte finally appeared, not by accident, not unexpectedly. She arrived at a business event Alexander was attending, the kind of event where everyone knew everyone, where every conversation had a purpose. Alexander was speaking with investors when he saw her. Charlotte stood across the room wearing a designer dress and the same confident smile she had always worn. For a moment, he remembered another version of his life, a life where everything was easier, predictable, controlled. Then his phone buzzed, a message from Emily. "Reminder, you promised you would not skip dinner tonight. I made something. It may or may not be edible." Alexander smiled before he could stop himself. Charlotte noticed. That was the first thing she noticed. Not the phone, not the message, the smile. Because she had known Alexander for years, and she knew something had changed. She walked toward him. "Alexander." He turned. "Charlotte, you look different." "I hear that often lately." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Is that because of her?" He did not answer. And that was answer enough. Charlotte smiled politely. "I wanted to congratulate you."
For what?
"Your marriage." "Thank you." I must admit, I was surprised. Alexander remained calm. "Why?" "Because I never thought you would actually go through with something like that." Something about the way she said it bothered him. Not because it insulted him. Because it insulted Emily. "She is a good person." Charlotte tilted her head. "I did not say she wasn't. You implied it." "No. I am just curious." "About what?" "Whether you actually love her." Alexander went quiet. The question should have been easy. Months ago, he would have laughed. Now, he could not. Because he had spent weeks pretending he did not feel something. Charlotte had asked the one question he had been avoiding. "Do you love her?" Before he could answer, Charlotte continued. "Alexander, you and I understand each other." He looked at her. "Did we?" She looked surprised. "Yes." "No." The answer was quiet. We understood each other's lifestyles." Charlotte stared. "That is not the same thing." "No." "And Emily does." Alexander thought about it. Emily did not understand his business. She did not understand why he enjoyed spreadsheets. She did not understand his obsession with planning. But she understood him, the person behind all of that. "Yes," he said. Charlotte's expression changed. Not anger, realization. "You really do love her." Alexander did not respond, because hearing someone else say it made it impossible to ignore. Charlotte looked away. "I thought you married her because your parents forced you." "At first, I did." "And now?" Alexander looked toward the window, toward the city, toward home. "Now I cannot imagine my life without her." The sentence surprised him, because it was the truth. Charlotte smiled sadly. I guess I should have known. Known what? That the woman everyone underestimated would be the only person who could reach you. For the first time, Alexander saw something different in Charlotte. Not jealousy, not anger. Acceptance. Maybe she had also realized that what they had was not love, it was familiarity. Comfort, a habit. Habits were not always meant to last. That evening, Alexander returned home earlier than expected. Emily was in the kitchen, and somehow just seeing her there made him feel calmer. You are home early, she said. Yes. Everything okay? He nodded. Yes. She studied him. You look like someone who had a deep emotional experience. Alexander removed his jacket. I spoke with Charlotte. Emily became quiet. And she is moving on. That is good. Yes. Another silence. Emily smiled slightly. Why do I feel like there is more? Alexander walked closer. Because there is. She waited. I realized something today. What? That for a long time, I thought love was supposed to feel easy. Emily looked confused. And I was wrong. He looked at her. Love is not easy. She remained silent. Is someone annoying you every morning and somehow making you happy about it? A small smile appeared. It is someone rearranging your books and making you angry, but secretly making your home feel warmer. Her smile grew. It is someone who tells you uncomfortable truths when everyone else is too afraid. Emily looked down. Alexander continued, and I think I spent years avoiding the one thing I actually needed. The room became quiet. Not uncomfortable, just full. Emily looked at him. Alexander. He took a breath. For a man who could negotiate $1,000,000 deals without hesitation, these words felt harder than anything he had ever done. You were never the problem. Her eyes softened. What? You were never too much. That sentence affected her immediately. Because somewhere deep inside, that was the wound she carried, the belief that she was difficult to love. Alexander saw it, and he understood. You were exactly enough. For a moment, said nothing. Then she smiled. Small, emotional, real. You are getting dangerously good at this. At what? Being human. He laughed. And this time, he did not try to hide it. Because with Emily, he no longer felt the need to. But neither of them knew that the biggest challenge was still ahead. Because while Alexander had finally accepted his feelings, someone else had been watching. Someone who believed Emily Carter did not belong in the Blackwood family. Someone who was determined to prove that Alexander had made the biggest mistake of his life. And that person was closer than either of them realized. The person watching from the shadows was not a stranger. It was someone who had spent years believing the Blackwood family belonged to people like him. Someone who understood wealth, power, and most importantly, control. His name was William Blackwood, Alexander's uncle, the older brother of Richard Blackwood. For years, William had believed that he should have been the one leading the family empire. He had the experience. He had the connections. He had the confidence. But there was one problem. Richard had chosen Alexander, and that decision had created a resentment William carried for decades. To the outside world, William was charming, polite, generous, the kind of man who remembered birthdays and donated to charities. But behind closed doors, he was different. He measured people by usefulness. He valued status above character. And in his eyes, Emily Carter was a mistake. Not because she was cruel. Not because she was incapable. But because she did not come from the world he respected. William first met Emily at a family dinner 2 months after the wedding. He had watched her walk into the Blackwood mansion, wearing a simple dress while everyone else wore expensive designer clothing. He noticed how she spoke, how she laughed, how she did not try to impress anyone, and immediately he disliked her, not because she had done something wrong, because she reminded him of something he hated. Authenticity. "You seem comfortable here," William said during dinner. Emily looked up from her plate. "I am trying." "That is interesting." "Why?" William smiled. "Because many people spend years trying to become comfortable in rooms like this." Emily understood the hidden meaning, but she chose not to react. "I suppose everyone has different experiences." William leaned back. "Yes, some people are born into certain environments. Others have to learn how to survive in them." The table became quiet. Alexander noticed. He looked at his uncle. "William," a warning. Small. But William smiled. "I am simply making conversation." Emily placed her glass down. "And I am simply answering." Her calmness surprised him. Most people became defensive. She did not. That bothered him more. Later that evening, when they were leaving, Alexander looked at her. "You handled that well." Emily smiled. "Your uncle?"
Yes, he is interesting.
Alexander laughed. "That is a polite way to say difficult." "I was trying to be respectful." "You do that often." "What?" "Find the nicest possible way to describe someone who is being rude." Emily shrugged. "Maybe because everyone has a reason for becoming who they are." Alexander looked at her. "You always try to understand people. Usually, even people who insult you. Especially them." "Why?" "Because sometimes angry people are just hurt people who never learned what to do with their pain." Alexander was quiet, because once again, she had said something he needed to hear. But William was not interested in understanding Emily. He was interested in removing her. A week later, he approached Richard privately. "This marriage is becoming a problem." Richard looked up from his documents. "What are you talking about?" Alexander. "What about him?" A is distracted. Richard frowned. Happy people are not distracted. William smiled. "That is exactly my concern." Richard studied him. "You do not like Emily." "I do not know her." "Then why are you judging her?" William leaned back. "Because I know people." Richard replied calmly. "You know appearances." The response irritated William, but he hid it. "I am thinking about the company." "Are you?" "Yes." Or are you thinking about control?" For a moment, William said nothing, because Richard had known him too long. He knew exactly where his brother's concerns came from. Meanwhile, Alexander and Emily were entering a new phase of their relationship. They were no longer just surviving the marriage. They were enjoying it. They had developed small habits. Every Sunday morning, Emily made breakfast. It was usually terrible. Alexander always complained, and she always ignored him. "You burned the pancakes again," he said one morning. Emily looked offended. "They are golden." "Dark gold." "Dark gold." Emily. "Yes." "You are the only person I know who can argue with a color." She smiled. "And yet you married me." That sentence made both of them pause. Because it was true. He had married her. But now, the reason was completely different. Before, he married her because he had no choice. Now he would choose her, every time. The realization was beautiful and terrifying, because caring about someone meant giving them the ability to hurt you. Alexander had spent his entire life avoiding that. Until Emily. One evening, they attended a charity event together. It was supposed to be simple. A dinner, a few speeches, a few conversations, but everything changed when a reporter approached them. "Mr. Blackwood, congratulations on your marriage." "Thank you." The reporter smiled. "There has been a lot of interest in your wife." Alexander noticed Emily tense slightly. The reporter continued. "Some people say your marriage was arranged because Emily's family wanted financial security. How do you respond to those claims?" The question was designed to create a reaction, a scandal, a headline. Alexander looked at Emily. For a moment, He saw the old insecurity return. The fear that people would see her as someone who did not belong, and something inside him changed. Before Emily, Alexander would have avoided controversy. He would have given a careful answer, but not now. My wife does not need my money. The reporter looked surprised. Alexander continued. She has her own dreams, her own talent, and her own identity. The cameras clicked. But more importantly, he said, she has something many wealthy people never develop. The room became quiet.
What is that?
Character. Emily looked at him. Alexander continued. People can inherit money. They can inherit names. They can inherit companies. He looked directly at the cameras. But they cannot inherit kindness. They cannot inherit courage. They cannot inherit authenticity. Nobody spoke. Because everyone understood. He was not defending her. He was celebrating her. That night, the video spread everywhere. The public reaction was immediate. Some praised Alexander. Some criticized him. But one thing was certain. Everyone knew Alexander Blackwood was no longer ashamed of Emily Carter. And that was exactly what William feared, because a loved wife had influence. A confident wife had power, and William knew something Alexander did not. The stronger Emily became inside the family, the harder it would become to control Alexander. So he changed his strategy. If he could not make Alexander doubt Emily, he would make Emily doubt herself. The first attack came quietly. A message, an anonymous email. Emily received it late one night while Alexander was asleep. She almost ignored it. Almost. One sentence caught her attention. You should know the truth about why Alexander married you. Her heart tightened. She opened the message. Inside was a photograph. A photograph from before their wedding. Alexander standing with his parents. And beneath it, a message. I never wanted you. You were chosen because everyone knew you would accept. Emily stared at the screen. She knew it was probably meant to hurt her. She knew someone wanted a reaction. But the words still found the old wound, the one she thought she had healed. The fear that she was simply convenient. That she was not chosen. That she was accepted only because nobody else wanted her. She placed the phone down. She looked toward the bedroom. Alexander was sleeping peacefully. The man who had told her she was enough. The man who had defended her. The man who had changed. Suddenly, doubt entered. Because what if the beginning was still true? What if everything beautiful that came after was built on a decision he never truly wanted? Emily sat there silently, and for the first time since their wedding, she wondered if she had mistaken kindness for love. The next morning, Alexander noticed immediately something was wrong. Emily was quiet. Not normal quiet, different. The kind of silence that meant something inside her was breaking. Emily? She looked up.
Yes.
What happened? Nothing. He frowned. Because he knew that answer. She had learned it from him. The same answer he used whenever something was wrong. Do not do that. Do what? Pretend. Her expression changed slightly. You taught me. The words hit harder than she intended. Alexander went silent. 'Cause she was right. He had spent years hiding, and now the person he loved was doing the same thing. What happened? Emily looked at him, and for a moment she almost told him, almost. But fear stopped her. 'Cause sometimes the hardest thing is not discovering the truth. It is asking someone you love whether the truth will hurt you. I need some time, she said quietly. Alexander felt something drop inside him. Time for what? She looked away, to figure out what is real. And with those words, the woman who had brought warmth into his life walked away, leaving Alexander with the one thing he feared most. Not losing control of his company. Not losing money. Not losing reputation. Losing her. Alexander Blackwood had faced difficult moments before. He had lost business deals worth hundreds of millions. He had walked away from partnerships that others considered impossible to replace. He had stood in front of angry investors and convinced them to trust him again. None of those moments compared to watching Emily become distant. Because business problems had solutions. People were different. People had feelings. People had doubts. And for the first time in his life, Alexander realized that his greatest fear was not failure, was being too late. For 3 days, Emily remained polite. That was the worst part. If she had been angry, he could have responded. If she had argued, he could have explained. But Emily was calm. Too calm. She still made coffee. She still asked about his meetings. She still smiled when necessary. But something had disappeared. The warmth. The easy laughter. The little moments that had slowly become the foundation of their relationship. The apartment felt exactly like it had before she arrived. Beautiful, expensive, empty, and Alexander hated it. One evening, he came home earlier than usual. Emily was sitting on the balcony reading. Normally, she would have looked up immediately and made some sarcastic comment about him arriving before midnight. This time, she only said, "You are home." 2 simple words, but they felt heavier than an argument. Alexander placed his keys down. "Yes," she turned the page. "How was your day?" "Fine." "Good." Silence. The kind of silence that made him uncomfortable. Alexander stood there for a moment. Then he walked toward her. Emily. She looked up. "What?" Something changed. She closed the book. "No." "Yes." She sighed. "Alexander?" "No." "Do not tell me nothing is wrong." Her expression softened slightly. Because she remembered. He had said those words to her before. When he was the one hiding. "You are learning," she said quietly. "Learning what?" "To notice." The answer hurt because it was true. For years, Alexander had believed he understood people. He could read negotiations. He could predict competitors. He could identify risks. He had never really noticed the emotional details. Until Emily. "What happened?" he asked. She looked away. "Does it matter?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because it matters to you." That answer surprised her. Because it was not the answer she expected. She expected him to ask for facts, evidence, a logical explanation. Instead, he asked because she was hurting. And that was new. Looked down at her hands. "Someone sent me something." Alexander immediately became serious. "Oh." "I don't know." "What did they send?" She hesitated. Then she handed him the phone. Alexander read the message. And the moment he saw it, his expression changed. Not because he believed it, because he knew exactly what it was. An attack. Someone had found the one insecurity Emily carried and used it as a weapon. He looked at the photograph. The one from before their weddings. The arrangement. The past. A carefully selected piece of truth designed to create the wrong conclusion. Emily, she watched his face. Is it true? The question was quiet, but it carried everything. Alexander sat beside her. The beginning. She nodded. "Did you marry me because you had to?" He could have lied. A weaker man would have. He could have said no. He could have pretended the situation had been different. But Alexander had learned something. Truth mattered, even when it was uncomfortable. Yes. Emily looked away. The answer hurt. Even though she expected it. Alexander continued quickly. "Yes, I married you because my parents pressured me." She swallowed. "But that is not the whole truth." "Isn't it?" "No." He turned toward her. "The man who stood at that altar did not know you." Emily remained silent. The man who came home that night thought marriage was a responsibility. He paused. "But the man sitting here right now knows you." Her eyes became emotional. And I am not staying because my parents wanted this." Alexander took a breath. "I am staying because I want this." Emily looked at him. "Do you understand what it feels like?" Her voice cracked slightly. "To know that you were not chosen first." Alexander's expression softened. "Yes." She shook her head. No, you don't. I do. How? Because my whole life, people chose Alexander Blackwood. She looked confused. What? The businessman. The name. The money. The reputation. He looked down. But very few people chose me. The honesty surprised her. I spent years thinking that if I became successful enough, nobody would ever leave. Emily listened. And then you came into my life. A small smile appeared. You were the first person who did not care about any of that. That is not true. It is. You cared that your bookshelf was organized. He laughed softly. Exactly. She smiled slightly. The first real smile in days. Alexander continued. You cared about the person I was becoming, person everyone thought I was. Emily looked at the city. I was scared. I know. I thought maybe I imagined everything. You didn't. People like your family. Bon. She stopped. Alexander understood. My family made you feel like you were lucky to be here? She nodded. I spent my whole life feeling like I had to prove I belonged. Alexander looked at her. You never had to prove anything to me. The silence between them changed. It was no longer cold. It was fragile, but alive. Then Alexander noticed something. The message came from an unknown number. Yes. Did you show anyone? No. Did you reply? No. Good. Emily looked at him. Good. Yes. Why? Because whoever sent it wanted you emotional. And they failed. She raised an eyebrow. I am sitting here questioning my marriage. But you are still here. That sentence stopped her. Because he was right. She had been afraid. She had been afraid, but she had not left, and neither had he. Alexander stood. I am going to find out who did this. Emily immediately shook her head. No. Why? Because I don't want another war. This is not a war. Alexander. He looked at her. This is exactly what you do. What? When something hurts you, you attack the problem. Because problems need solutions. People are not always problems. The words reminded him of something. Something she had told him months ago, and he realized she was still teaching him. Again, he sat back down. Then what should I do? Emily thought for a moment. Tell me the truth. I did. Keep doing that. Alexander nodded. I can do that. For the first time in days, they sat together. Not completely healed. Not magically fixed. Together. And sometimes, that was the first step. The next morning, Alexander began investigating quietly. He did not involve the police. He did not create public drama. He simply used the resources he had spent years building. His assistant gathered information. The email trail. The photograph source, the sender. Within 48 hours, they had a name, William Blackwood. When Alexander saw the report, he did not feel anger immediately. He felt disappointment. Because anger was easy. Disappointment meant he had expected better. His uncle, a member of his own family, the person who had smiled at Emily during dinner, the person who had acted concerned, had been trying to destroy her confidence. Alexander sat in his office staring at the report. Emily. He answered immediately. Hello. Are you busy? No. A pause. Then she said, I wanted to tell you something. What? I think I know why this happened. Alexander stayed quiet. Someone doesn't want me here. His hand tightened. Emily. No, listen. Her voice was calm. I spent a lot of time wondering if I belonged in your world. She paused. Maybe the real question is whether your world deserves someone like me. Alexander smiled slightly. That sounds like you. What? Turning an insult into confidence. Someone has to. He laughed, and for the first time in days, the sound felt normal. But neither of them knew that William's plan had failed for a reason he never considered. He thought hurting Emily would push Alexander away, He thought doubt would destroy their marriage. He misunderstood the one thing that made their relationship different. They were no longer two strangers forced together. They were two people who had chosen each other. And once Alexander Blackwood chose something, he protected it. Alexander Blackwood had always believed power came from control. Control over decisions, control over emotions, control over outcomes. But, standing inside the family boardroom, 2 days later, looking at the people who had spent years building the Blackwood name, he realized something important. Some battles were not won by control. They were won by courage. William sat at the end of the table, calm and confident, almost too confident. That was what bothered Alexander the most. His uncle had always been good at pretending to care, pretending to support, pretending that every action came from good intentions. But Alexander knew the truth now, and once he knew the truth, he could never ignore it. "I assume you wanted to speak with me," William said. Alexander placed the file on the table. "I did." William glanced at it. "What is this?" "Something you should explain." For the first time, William's expression changed, only slightly, but Alexander noticed. "What are you talking about?" The message sent to Emily. Silence. The room became completely still. William looked at him, then smiled. "I have no idea what you mean." Alexander expected denial. He expected excuses. What he did not expect was how quickly William dismissed it, as if Emily's pain meant nothing. That was the moment Alexander stopped seeing him as family. "You tried to make her believe she did not belong." William leaned back. "I tried to protect this family." Alexander almost laughed. "Protect?" "Yes." "From what?" William looked directly at him. "From mistakes." Alexander's expression hardened. "She is not a mistake. You are letting emotions influence your judgment." "No." Alexander shook his head. "For the first time in my life, I am making a decision because I understand what matters." William looked frustrated. "You are choosing a woman you barely know over your own family." Alexander paused, then answered calmly, "Yes." The simple answer surprised him too, because years ago, he would never have said that. He would have chosen the company, the expectation. But Emily had changed the way he saw everything. William stood. "You are being reckless." "No." Alexander picked up the file. "I am finally being honest." William walked away without another word, but Alexander knew this was not finished. People like William did not surrender easily. They waited. They planned. They looked for another weakness. But this time, Alexander was not alone. When he returned home, Emily was sitting on the balcony, the same place where she had spent hours thinking about whether she belonged. But now, when Alexander looked at her, he did not see someone uncertain. He saw someone strong. Someone who had survived being underestimated. Someone who had walked into a world that judged her and still refused to become smaller. "You look serious," she said. "I spoke with William." She immediately understood. "And," he admitted enough. Emily looked down. "I am sorry." Alexander frowned. "For what?" "For causing problems." The answer surprised him. "Emily, I know your family is complicated. I know your life was already difficult before me." He walked closer. "You are not the problem." She looked up. "You always say that." "Because it is true." "But what if I am?" Alexander sat beside her. "Then I am the problem too." She looked confused. "What?" "Because I spent years allowing people to decide what mattered." He looked at the city. "I let my family define success. I let business define my value. I let everyone around me believe I was someone who never needed anything." He turned toward her. "Then you arrived and proved me wrong." Emily smiled. "Sounds like I was annoying." "You were." "Thank you." "I was not finished." She laughed. Alexander continued. "You were annoying Because you forced me to see things I ignored. What things? That a perfect life can still be empty. The words stayed between them. Because both of them understood. Their marriage had started because other people decided their future. But their love had grown because they chose it themselves. A year after their wedding, people who knew Alexander Blackwood noticed something unusual. He had changed. Not dramatically, not in a way that made headlines. The change was quieter. He left work earlier. He took vacations. He attended events because he wanted to, not because he needed to maintain an image. And sometimes, the most shocking thing of all, he laughed. His employees noticed. His friends noticed. Even his competitors noticed. The man who was once known as impossible to read had become someone who actually smiled. And everyone knew why Emily. She had not saved him. She had not fixed him. She had simply shown him that he did not need to spend his entire life protecting himself from happiness. One evening, Alexander came home carrying a small box. Emily looked suspicious.
What is that?
A gift. She narrowed her eyes. Should I be worried? Why would you be worried? Because you are terrible at surprises. That is unfair. The last surprise you gave me was a new filing system. It was useful. It was romantic if the person receiving it was a printer. Alexander laughed. Then he handed her the box. Inside was a simple necklace. Nothing excessive. Nothing designed to show wealth. Just something elegant. Emily looked at it. He smiled. Turn it over. She did. There was an engraving. A small sentence. She read it quietly. You were never my obligation. Her eyes became emotional. Underneath it were 4 more words. You were my choice. For a moment, Emily said nothing. Then she looked at him. You know you have become dangerously romantic. I blame you. Yes? She smiled. How? Before you, I thought love was something that distracted people. And now I think it is the reason people become better. Emily stepped closer. And the millionaire who thought his arranged bride was ugly. Alexander smiled. I was wrong. Very wrong. Completely wrong. She laughed. Good answer. He looked at her. But I was wrong about more than that. What else? I thought beauty was something you noticed immediately. Emily waited. It is not. He touched the necklace gently. Sometimes beauty is someone leaving notes on your desk. A smile appeared. Sometimes it is someone arguing about books. She laughed. Sometimes it is someone burning breakfast every Sunday. That happened once. It happened many times. Fine. And Alexander looked at her. Sometimes beauty is someone walking into your life and making you realize you were never really living before. Emily became quiet, because after everything they had been through, those words mattered. The rumors, the doubts, the judgment, the fear, all of it had brought them here. To this moment. 2 people who never expected to love each other. 2 people who were supposed to be a mistake. 2 people who proved everyone wrong. The world had looked at Emily Carter and decided she was not enough for Alexander Blackwood. They saw her background, her simplicity, her differences. They assumed she needed him. But they never understood. Alexander did not need someone who matched his status. He needed someone who challenged his heart. And Emily did exactly that. The woman he thought he would never love became the woman he could never imagine losing. The arranged marriage that began as an obligation became the greatest decision of his life. 'Cause sometimes the person you least expect becomes the person who changes everything. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks becomes the person everyone remembers. And sometimes love does not arrive with perfect timing. Sometimes it arrives in the middle of confusion, in the middle of mistakes, in the middle of a decision you never wanted to make. And then, somehow, it becomes the one decision you would make again. Every single time.